Okay, we're on. Welcome to the listening, Briony Greenhill. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's nice to be here. That's a lovely name for it, the listening in the clearing.
Yeah. It's a good reminder to me as well to practice that art of listening.
Yeah.
It's a very useful tool I found for really kind of having a connection with people is placing my emphasis on listening rather than thinking what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Which I know you know all about from counsel or any of those kind of techniques of people coming together and speaking. And it is a very powerful tool, that side of it.
In vocal improv, we practice this co-listening. So you're balancing you're listening and your awareness. It's interesting, this intermingling of listening and awareness. Because, for example, if you go into owl eyes, you know, this nature connection thing of owl eyes. When I work with groups and I get them all to go into owl eyes, their listening improve. They can, once they start receiving everybody in the visual field, they start also hearing each other. And in vocal improv, we're listening inside for what's happening in me, what's wanting to come out of me, how do I feel, what are these impulses coming up in me as a singer, and what's happening around me. You're trying to track actually a few different voices and your own. So it's, people find it tiring and need to eat a lot and sleep a lot because it's actually a really high level of presence. And then, you know, I think as we're shifting paradigm, I don't even really know the parameters of this conversation yet, but off we go, isn't it? It's this, because there's quality of listening, and you give such beautiful listening. It's like the better the listening, the better the expression. I think in this paradigm shift from power over to power with, like, how do you do power with? You have to be able to listen to yourself so that you're there, and listen to the other so that they're there, and so that together you can figure out what you got between you. Just like vocal improv, really.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say about the owl eyes thing. It's that balance, isn't it? Because we're coming out of this very left brain, masculine, cultural way, which is all about focus, which is all about reductionism. You know, everything is dropped down to one thing. And when you talk about the owl eyes, which is a way of, instead of focusing your vision on details on one particular thing, it's noticing the field of everything and going into a more relaxed, less focused form of vision that's much, much wider. And to me, that, you know, that feels like a more feminine aspect. It's more about the whole, the field, rather than the particular pointy details. And I feel like that balance between, when you're talking about the improvisation, the noticing what you're doing, which is maybe more the masculine kind of pointed thing, and noticing what's going around you in the context with one other person or everyone or the whole context, and bringing those two things into a kind of harmony, you know, so that they can, it's a great metaphor, I think, like you're saying, for what we're seeking at this time, I feel intuitively. And maybe that tiredness and hungriness is that we're not kind of practiced so much culturally in that more feminine way, because we're so in our fucking heads and so pointed and driven and pokey.
Right, like it's tiring for the attention, because it's demanding on the attention. I don't know if it's a metaphor, Tim. I think it's the actual itself, because if we're coming out of a time of power over, and it's been man over woman, head over body, human over nature, all these over and unders, And we're trying to shift from that into a time of power with. Man with woman, head with body, human with more than human nature. I think if you're doing power over or power under, you don't need two-way listening. If you're doing power over, like if I'm doing power over you, I don't need to listen to you. I just tell you what's what. And if we're doing you having power over me, I don't need to listen to me. I just need to listen to you and follow you. So in power over, we only have unidirectional listening. And it's quite interesting. And then, because in relationship, and it's funny, there can be these kind of archetypes and habits that have historically come up for me in relationship. And one is my own reductionism, this kind of historical power over, where he has the power and I just listen to him and follow him. I stop listening to myself. It doesn't work. I diminish and kick up and get uncomfortable. And so we haven't needed this skill, but as we come into power with, then we need this skill of two-way listening, or ecological listening, where you're listening not just to two bits of consciousness, not just two bits of life, but actually it's me and you and the community and the forest. I mean, I don't know if your listeners know where you live, but Tim's made this, dear listeners, Tim's made this exquisitely beautiful clearing in a Norfolk forest. It's so tended. It's this kind of circular lawn surrounded by forest. So and it's thick forest. It's very rural. It's very wild. So you hear the birds. There's a lot of life in there. So if you and I were actually sitting there physically together now, well, we'd be inside because it's winter solstice. Happy solstice, by the way. And it's cold. But if we were outside, I'd be listening to me, listening to you, and listening to the forest. So it's actually entering this ecological capacity to be in a community and navigate your own self among multiple other bits of life, bits of consciousness that you're equal with, that you're kin with, that you're seeking to power with.
Yeah, what's coming up for me as well right now as I'm hearing you speak is the realization also that there are moments where that other way might be the most appropriate thing to be doing as well. It's not this kind of, oh, that's bad, this is good. Then I feel like a harmony between these two ways of being as well. Because there are instances where power over, power under might be the best thing to be going on. And if you think about a kind of maybe a really heightened situation or an emergency situation or something that just requires immediate kind of call response things to happen, then that way of being is an appropriate way of being. When it becomes problematic is when it's fixed and institutionalized, when it isn't naturally occurring, because in a balanced relationship, it could be that you become the power over at certain points and I become the power under, and it's very much a natural subordination, if you like, to a natural authority. It's not a kind of job title authority. It's one that just occurs in the moment. Like, I guess perhaps if you were leading, say, a vocal improv workshop and you just had to communicate something, there'd be moments when you would be the one taking that position of power, quite rightly, and I would quite naturally subordinate to your experience and wisdom, and that's why I was on the course, you know. So it's good for me to bring that up, because I know in myself as well, when I'm moving away from something, there's a tendency to reject it, whereas I'm seeing now that all of these things have their place. It's when they become stuck or institutionalized, or they're not just naturally occurring spontaneously in the moment. That's when they become problematic.
Yeah, I agree with natural authority and kind of let's say, multipolar leadership. You know, so if we were going to build something, you'd be in charge, and if we were going to vocally improvise, I'd be in charge, right? But each time, with authority moving to where it most naturally is, there needs to be attunement. Like when I lead a retreat, I'm really in charge, you know. These are the values. These are how we're going to treat each other. I'm in charge of the food. I'm in charge of the schedule. I rule. But if I did that, or sometimes when I do it without attunement to my group and everybody in it, we hit problems. So it's kind of like dom-sub relationships. Like if somebody's going to be dom, somebody's going to be sub, then the dom has to be so attuned to the sub. If they're essentially taking their human power for them and taking responsibility for that person's power, then they've got to be so attuned. And I think this is where we see abuse coming, when people have power and they're not attuned and they're not listening and they don't give a shit. That's when damage gets done.
Yeah, sure. When it's from that position of fear or brokenness, where the conversation isn't happening, where the exchange isn't going on. I mean, that's really what it is, isn't it? It's this flow state between the two, where, you know, it's always kind of updating to what's happening in real time, the feedback. Yeah, interesting.
So what is this listening thing that you're doing, and why did you want to speak to me?
So it's just something that's become more and more fascinating to me is conversations. Well, I've always had an interest in more formal conversation, like in listening, what I call listening circles or way of counsel, or there are lots of names for these different forms of people sitting down together and really consciously trying to communicate something. So that's the kind of origin of it, I suppose. But more recently, especially online, the place where real conversation and intelligent conversation is going on seems to be in this format, the long form conversation. And I feel like as the old media that we were used to in years past, which now to me seems completely broken and compromised and corrupted and no longer delivering reliable information, as that kind of descends further into chaos, it seems to me that the only place that I can see right now where real information and an openness to discussing the depth of things or the subtlety of things or the complexity of things, maybe without even getting to conclusions, or, you know, it seems more real, more honest, more useful and more compelling because of that. So I've been watching a lot of podcasts and following lots of different people and just really feeling more and more like, oh, this is something I want to do. And there are all these amazing people I've met on my journey and who are out there that I may yet meet. And this is a great way to kind of explore some of the things I'm interested in, or learn something, or go into areas I know nothing about and want to kind of see where they lead. And it's an art form. It's so creative. You know, a real conversation where people are open and there's no pressure or hurry to get anywhere or get your opinion across or be right or any of that, where that's all removed. It's this incredibly fertile, creative place, and always something new comes out of a conversation like that for me. And it's so exciting, that the creative aspect of that. So I feel like it's an artistic jam, and something, you know, all kinds of things can come from it. So I love it for that. So that's where it's coming from.
Very pleasing to hear that, Tim, because when I first met you, it was maybe 2017 or 2018, and you were kind of this gem of a human being tucked away in quite a secret, introverted, hidden kind of feeling in this sacred clearing you created over years of artistic, very deep tending. And it's like, wow, who is this guy? Maker, poet, sensitive one, deep one, artist, father, partner, soulful man. And it feels like with the internet and these times, something in you is like, it's time to go beyond the clearing. It's time to invite more people to the conversation, or open a window to me, to the wider world. So cheers. Good for you. Yeah,
well,
nice one.
That, thanks for bringing that up, because it very much is part of that. Certainly a realization that I've been hiding for a very long time, and I can no longer justify it or even stand it. I have been on something of what I'm now calling my 20-year midlife crisis. But it was a retreat. I think because I left London in a bit of a sorry state, I think, when I first came here. And it was so soothing and healing and kind of nurturing. And I didn't realize in my kind of retreat from the world that I was actually enrolling in some deep ecology learning, or something like learning about land and connection with place, and what I call the greater body, which is the land wherever you are. It's an extension of the physical. And I really had to get to it through my body, because I'd been very much up in my head and, maybe quite in my heart as well, but not that in my body really, for most of my life, I think. So I'd sort of started exploring more through this kind of immersion in the landscape, realizing my body again, and through it the body of nature, and just the complete attachment and dependency and lack of separation really between us and the living web of life, the earth. And even the energies, not just the surface kind of living material, which is the soil kind of animated through all these life forms, but the deeper, bigger energies, the sort of planetary cosmic energies, the geology, the sort of molten iron beneath us at the core, all of that, we're profoundly woven into that. And it's quite an achievement of the prefrontal lobes, or whatever it is that's kind of brought us away from that, which is an incredible achievement. I don't know how we did it.
It's a bit like flat earth theory, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it has an insight. If you look at like the Oxford English Dictionary or the Google Dictionary, and you search nature, I don't know if this is still true, it was true a couple of years ago. It basically says all the plants and animals and rivers and birds and fish and everything apart from humans. It's the dictionary definition of nature. I'm like, excuse me. Last time I looked, I was born, I'll live, I'll die. I drink rivers, I pee rain, I eat food from the earth, I shit food for the soil. I depend on that utterly. Without it, I die. When I die, I'm food for the soil. Like, I sing, I love, I procreate. Well, I don't have babies, but what if that is not nature? Like, why would you put me in a separate box or deny my nature?
Well, that we even have a word that is that, it tells you a lot, that separate us, that I guess for me, it seems like it's something. I don't know enough about other cultures and other languages, but it definitely seems to come from the Christian tradition to me, which seems to be very much about body bad, you know.
Right.
You know, and but brought us up into our heads, I think, and in a way, it's what gave birth to science, because I see science as a kind of child of Christianity, and is much, from my perspective, they're very related structurally in the way that they seem to operate, and it did seem to be that kind of removal, or not even removal, but the kind of conquering of the animal, the body, the physical.
The conquering of the body, the animal.
Yeah, subjugation of the kind of primal
damn body. And then you've got to ask, hey Tim, I just need to make myself more comfortable. I need to shift a rug and get a couple of books for this computer. Can we have a comfortable pause? Okay. Well,
here we go. Okay, we're back. You shrank.
I what? I shrank.
You shrank.
Okay. Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I'm not your person for talking about the history and philosophy of science. It's not a topic I can talk easily on. But nature, the body, Christianity, I'd say it's not just Christianity, it's Judeo-Christian. It's the Judeo-Christian legacy that goes back thousands of years. I just read this amazing book called Kadesha, basically a fiction about King Josiah in Jerusalem, I don't know, 600 years before Christ, 1,000 years before Christ, something like that. And basically it was the time of the battles for monotheism. So in Jerusalem at the time, you had Yahweh's temple, which was the kind of masculine god. Scribes thought, blah, blah, blah. Scribes gradually became rabbis. And then you had Astarte's temple, which was the temple of sexuality, sacred feminine, tree altars, sex in temples, just a whole different, like sex in temples, sex in churches. It's like it's unthinkable in the modern mind, right? But apparently in various places around the world, Jerusalem, Egypt, Gozo, this island here, there were temples for sexuality. And basically King Josiah led a war in Jerusalem and killed everybody associated with Astarte's temple and burned it down, and said, okay, basically launched monotheism. And then King Josiah was then killed by an Egyptian dude, where in Egypt they still had polytheism and sacred sexuality temples and this, that, and the other. So it was kind of like these different areas, leaders of different areas were trying to create monotheism, and then somebody else would kill them, and then polytheism would come back, but then somebody else in monotheism would have more power. And then we ended up with, basically, apparently this was kind of the lineage that grew into Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, which were all basically three dominating religions with, frankly, to me, I was raised atheist, right? Frankly, to me, quite weird attitudes towards sex, the body, and women, and the earth, and imbalanced attitudes, like attitudes that are power over because they don't accept the nature of things. They don't accept that we're nature, we're animals, we're sexual beings, sex is natural, sacred. It has a tinge of wildness to it, right? When sexual energies come into us, we're in our wild natures. We're not very ordered anymore, So there.
It's a control thing, right?
Yeah, for some reason, people decided to.
Of the wildness of that.
Yeah, for some reason, people decided they didn't like that, and they decided to really try and keep that at bay. And I suppose then in other parts of the world, you know, you have female genital mutilation. You just have, just cut women's clitorises off. We can't handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to millions upon millions of people still now. So, whew, it's a hot topic, this suppression of our nature and the suppression of our sexuality and the conjoinment of those things.
And in a way, you can see that it gave rise to this technological world that we have now as well. It's like, no, we can't be doing all of that sex stuff. We've got to get things done, right? We've got to do stuff. We've got to control, you know, everything's got to be ordered, controlled. And that's kind of what the technological culture is. It's the extension of that. And it must, I mean, as a man, I can kind of, and an imaginative one at that, I can sort of imagine the fear that men can have and do have around women and the wildness and the lack of order and control. Because it is the field, it is this kind of nebulous, all-encompassing energy that's not particular or specific. And that can be terrifying to a kind of imbalanced, over kind of masculine sort of left brain person, because it doesn't make sense. It's not manageable. You can't contain it. It's threatening, you know. I think, and also if you think about nature and wild nature and animals like predating on humans, like way back in time before we conquered the landscape in that way, where, you know, we are weak animals compared to a lot of wild animals. You know, we don't have that strength or the speed or all of those capacities that other animals have. And if they're predators and we're on the menu, you know, that's fucking terrifying. So there's a deep kind of fear root, I think, as well, in this wild animal nature that seems to somehow be tied in with the feminine, and is, yeah, I can see how that would arise out of, and as sort of groups of people started to congregate and early civilizations formed, which inevitably, you know, needed order to sustain, you can see how these things would get amplified. So it's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating to me because it did get out of balance very quickly, it seems, and that we went down that, you know, one-sided street really quickly, really fast, and really far. And maybe only now are we coming to, like, realizing, shit, what have we just done for the last however many thousand years, you know? We've been out of balance, you know, or maybe it's a huge cyclical thing that happens on time frames that are way beyond what I can conceive of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert scholar of it, but I'm not sure it's fair to say it happened quickly. I think it happened over a period of maybe hundreds of years.
Well, yeah, when I say quick, I'm talking about the history of,
in terms of like
100,000 or
whatever.
It's pretty recent in that sense. But yeah, you're right.
You're saying a lot there. Because here's the thing, because men have wildness too. I understand there's this, in the gender dynamics, sure, the feminine aspect, you know, sure, it has a wildness, but it also has a lot of ground in it, a lot of earth in it. We attach, we can attach very, you know, I make love to somebody more than 3 times and I'm kind of like, my vines are starting to wrap around them, you know. We make home, we make order, we make nourishment, we encourage healthy cycles, bedtime, sleeping, you know. We form communities and stable relationships. We form sisterhood. We hold community together. Women actually create a ton of structure, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But we also have this like this pleasure life that's often quite different to men's. We have these bodies that are different to men's and more unique, and more different. Our yonis are more different to one another. Our sexuality varies woman by woman a bit more, I think, than by men in terms of pleasure orgasmic patterns and cycles. Yeah, we're on delicate territory here, but there's, I don't know, are men afraid of women's wildness? Are men afraid of their own wildness? Because men's wildness is epic and very strong, very powerful when it has its place in its room. And many women's wildness is fairly suppressed as well. So I don't know if
it crosses over. No, you're absolutely right. I see that. It is more, and there is a kind of masculine femininity and a feminine masculinity, and right. So all these things mix, don't they? They sort of, for sure there is a wildness, and it in men, and it perhaps was the taming of the wildness, in both sides that was happening there, because for sure, as you say, that kind of the masculine wild it's a powerful thing, and it can destroy things very quickly. It can disrupt. It's massively powerful, and that's an energy. That's an energy that men right now are really struggling with how to kind of deal with that. And there's been a lot of rejection of that, very healthy rejection of that in the wake of what's going on, but inevitable, really. So there's a whole universe of rediscovering that's going on right now as well, I think, in a lot of men.
Yeah. What is healthy?
Yeah, I'm noticing, like in martial arts, power. There's a lot of interest in martial arts again, which is really good. That's a very healthy, structured, positive arena for that exploration, interesting. So tell me where you are then, because you're kind of you're dropping little hints.
I'm at an emerging temple. I'm on the island of Gozo, which is part of Malta. It's in the Mediterranean, and if Malta is it's fairly developed. I think it used to be an English colony, so it's fairly anglicized. It's fairly developed. Gozo is its sleepy little. It's kind of the Suffolk of Malta. It's a sleepy kind of, where the Maltese have their holiday homes, and so there's a retreat center here called Satori where I'm staying, and there's an organization called ISTA, which is the International School of Temple Arts, which is really about trying to revive temple sexuality and reposition sexuality back in the web of the holy, the wholesome, the sacred, the welcomed, the celebrated, rather than the shamed, the excluded, the tamed, the denied, the made sinful, which is, so it's kind of rescuing sexuality from its Judeo-Christian imprint and letting it see what it wants to be once it gets more permission and support and celebration. So it's deep. So I did ISTA level 1. And then I was like, that's enough for me. Everybody else went and did ISTA level 2. I had a freaking rest. Then everybody came back.
Give us some detail. What's ISTA level 1? What does that involve?
Okay, so they're very secretive about it. Okay. So I can't tell you what happened. What I can tell you was...
Just before you carry on, so this secretiveness is probably... I'm guessing, an essential part of something that's so sort of new and young and fragile in a way. And rather than, is it or not? Why do you think?
I think it's a bit more the way they say it is that they want people to have, it's like going through something you don't know what is going to happen. Whereas if you're like, oh, right, and on day 4, and what they have had before is that people on Facebook detailing, and then we did this, and then that happened, and then that happened. They're like, because a lot of us start with a lot of shame and fear and judgment around our sexuality, we can then be really reactive. Like on day 1, you're attitudinally in a different place to how you're going to react to things on day 6. So if somebody on day 6 starts saying on Facebook to people who haven't even signed up, let alone started day 1, like, oh, you're dealing with a different mental paradigm. Attitudinally towards sexuality. So you have to basically be sensitive to everybody. A lot of people out there like haven't done ISTA. So there's layers of protection around this different culture of different attitudes towards sexuality.
This is an old method for initiation into spiritual practices. This is something that was very common in the past, I think, where you had to be like in before you found stuff out. It's probably only quite a recent thing, especially with the internet and this connection, that stuff is just out there, which kind of is maybe good and bad for those reasons. You know, like if you are turning up with all these preconceived ideas, that's a whole other load of baggage to wade through to have the experience. So it does make sense to me to have that kind of more innocent beginner's mind.
And they managed to manage it, you know, because I think people on the whole really value what's happening, really grateful for it. It costs a lot of money. But if you look at the ISTA website, I mean, it's COVID times, right? The world is on lockdown and there are ISTA trainings happening all over the world. Many of them. There's like 12,000 people in the Facebook community. It's growing like a mycelium mushroom network, because I think it's plugging into something in the zeitgeist in the times. And so despite the scale and the growth of the community, they're managing to maintain this privacy, and I don't want to disrupt it, but I think what I will say is it's okay, I'll tell you this. When my sexuality arrived as a pubescent girl, the way it lived inside of me was wider and wilder than what culture offered me. So as pleasure and arousal and somebody at the door.
Oh my God, it's the priests. They heard. Hold that thought.
Okay, can I pee while you answer the door?
Okay, we're back.
Okay. So as I was saying, as I became pubescent and sexuality arrived in me, how it was living in my desires and fantasies was basically wider and wilder than what culture offered me. And so it quickly became apparent that like the acceptable thing was like with one bloke, and in the context of a monogamous relationship, like a mini marriage. Like in those circumstances, it was okay. But if it was anything other than that, you're going to get punished. And I did get punished from a variety of angles. Everyone around will let you know that's not okay. You better get in that box. And it's harsh. And yet, despite that, within me, sexuality stayed bigger than the options. But it took a long time. It took until I was 35 in the San Francisco Bay Area and recently divorced to go, fuck it, this stuff is true for me, and go looking for it and ask friends, and how it's a different sex culture there. So it's much more people go, oh yeah, you'd like Essence nights, my buddy goes, you can go, oh yeah, I'm into that, I'll go with you, da, da, da. You don't need to go with a partner, you can go with a friend, da, da, da. So I started to explore it in California. I'm coming out now, Tim. This is my coming out. I've been incredibly private about all of this for like 5 years, 6 years.
Hooray!
This is now public, and it's probably as a result of ISTA. So I'd say what ISTA is, it's a support place for people going through that journey and saying, hey, my sexuality is bigger than it's been allowed to be. And then there's a lot of healing that needs to be involved in that, because we've been traumatized in this lifetime and in lineages, you know. And there's a lot of skills that we need, because when your sexuality gets wider and wilder, especially within a community, it's essentially love is opening. Love is no longer monogamous. And you might form a bond with somebody, and then you're going to see them in somebody else's arms, maybe inside somebody else's body, in front of your eyes. You're going to see that. And initially, it's unbearable. So you are going to have some really strong emotions. And what they say about jealousy, there's this what I learned in very direct ways, and this was with my body, is that behind physical pain is often emotional pain. And if you have ways to fully express that emotional pain, and oh my God, people in this community, we hand scream, we pillow scream, we have tantrums on beds, we flap pillows, we rage, we yell. Oh my God, the things that adults can express when there's safe ways to do it and it's not putting it on anyone, it's like, damn. And talk about male wildness, but it's female wildness as well. But when you have ways to express that emotional pain, there comes a point where you're just kind of done and it's fine. And it doesn't hurt anymore, and you're just with the present. And, you know, often at the root of jealousy, there's fear of abandonment, there's comparison, there's a scarcity mentality, there's a monogamous frame, like, oh, if I don't get love from this person, I'm not going to get love from any person. And if I'm rejected by this person, I'm then unlovable. Or seeing your sweetie with somebody else automatically means rejection. But we take a deep breath. What seems to be happening in a lot of the paradigm shifting world, right? Communities like Zeg, Tamera, Network for New Culture, people like Ian McKenzie or Charles Eisenstein, whatever, they're all really exploring open relationship. And it's like, this guy, Bruce Lyon, who has this place called Haydn in New Zealand, I don't know him, but he's coming out and saying, as we shift paradigm, sexuality and intimacy being more of a tribal thing is a feature of that. And that definitely seems to be a feature of these communities I've named. And definitely when you hear people like Dr. Kim Tallbear talking about Native American sexuality prior to white colonization. And what's interesting with that is it's like an indigenous culture that's more recent, right? It's only 200 or 300 years that it's been oppressed. So the memories are more available, the documentation is more available. When you live in a community where love is opened, you're not getting your sex from just one person. You're not getting your emotional support from just one person. You're not getting your sense of stability and belonging from just one person. In some communities, you're not even having your financial or domestic relationships with just one person. Those things become tribalized. And what you learn and you start to directly experience is like, okay, you were with your sweetheart last night and now they're with another sweetheart. And you're like, oh, but then, oh, over here, there's this other thing that's enriching in a different way. And so it's this move out of a monogamous mentality that it was strongly conditioned by. And I seem to be personally moving beyond it. And I think I seem to be entering my first ever open relationship.
So there's immediately, so for me, there's something that comes up straight away, which is there anything about those impulses of attachment that you can see, given your experience now, are healthy? Or are they always just some kind of the result of a kind of scarcity thing or a fear thing or something, some kind of wounding from childhood? Or is there any place where that might be the right response. That's immediately what I kind of think when I'm putting myself imaginatively into that situation.
Yeah.
And also feeling like, well, how would it be for me?
Yeah.
Knowing myself, and that would be where I would get challenged immediately.
Yeah.
As you're saying, if I see the woman that I love, you know, having pleasure with another man or woman, or, you know, and maybe it's more with a man for me. There's a gender aspect of that.
Right.
I'm less threatened by, and maybe even quite open to the idea of a woman being involved, but somehow a man is like a direct threat to mine. Yeah. Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah. His the stag, the protection. Yeah.
So instead of, you know, getting beyond my kind of triggering and going as deep as I can, I'm thinking, well, is there something valid in that attachment? Is there something good about monogamy? And I guess when children are involved, maybe that's when it starts to become more, make some sense, perhaps, I don't know. But what do you think about that?
The first thing I'll say is this is really live for me, and there's more questions than answers here for me right now. So it makes me want to start singing, because that's when wisdom comes. I don't think attachment is the same as monogamy, and I think, you know, if you're shitting bricks on day one, seeing your beloved in another arms, possibility, if you go through 6 days of ISTA, by day 6, it genuinely feels different to you. And meanwhile, you've gone through a bit of hell, you've had some profound support, you've visited parts of yourself you didn't know existed, you've risen in a new and broader power, and now actually you're fine with it. And frankly, there's somebody else's arms you like being in too, and you're making it work. So that's number one. So the feelings that you have right now are real, and in the world there are places where those feelings can go on a journey and transform, if you want to do that. And ISTA is one of those places, and potentially Tamera Love School, but I haven't done it, I just hear about it, and other places. So that's one thing, if you want to, and it's optional. The other thing is, I think attachment is like, what is attachment? Because we're tribal creatures, right? And relational stability is a good thing. It's good to know who your people are. It's good to build up many layers of soil in your relationships, which takes acts of returning to the same table over and over again. Like you and I, we have a nice connection, right? We always appreciate our chats. We've known each other, 2 years? I have a sense, you know, if we return in 10 years, if we keep doing this for 10 years, we're going to have made much deeper relational soil between us. And that's exciting because it's really good already. So what will it be like in 2030? Don't know. Point is, we wouldn't have that returning to each other without our ability to attach. And like when I left the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'd been living for many years and had a kind of belonging that I was more belonging I'd ever had anywhere, to leave there was fucking devastating and disoriented my sense of self profoundly. And I realized, wow, attachment isn't just a bond to a guy. It's a bond to a place, to land, to a community, to culture, to subculture, to friends, and wow, if I take myself away from a whole world, I actually don't know who I am necessarily without all of them. Like, self is relational. So if we are tribal creatures, if we want to form communities, if we want to form families, if we want to have stable parenting, then we need a seemingly natural functionality of growing around each other like vines and holding on to our people. Yeah. So there seems to be something very natural, very valuable about the ways that we attach to each other.
But it's perhaps more naturally a communal thing rather than the nuclear family, the monogamous, which does seem to be a kind of recipe for insanity.
Right.
In my experience,
says
anyway.
the nuclear family is radioactive, and I mean, God bless them. Some people make it work, but damn. A lot of people don't, you know, or there's a lot of suffering within those households, and stoicism or not. And I think if you look at the nuclear family, where did it come from? Like, first of all, what Christianity says about sex is like, you know, ideally you wouldn't actually have any sex at all. Like if you're a Catholic vicar, like, please just don't have sex. Like, I know you're human, but
well,
please don't.
Immaculate conception, right?
Immaculate conception, Virgin Mary, like all
no hands, no nothing. Exactly. Didn't even touch her.
Exactly. So like, you know, ideally just don't have sex, but if you're gonna have to have sex, then make it be with one person, marry them, and it's them for life, okay? And that's the box we're going to put sex in. So that was the kind of Christian answer to sexuality. And then you put that on top of the Industrial Revolution, where you've got this transformation of Britain, this transformation of Europe, the destruction of coherent villages, and people shuffled into cities where suddenly actually it's kind of a survival team. He goes out and works, she stays home and does the housework, you know, raises the kids, food, blah, blah. You get this kind of survival team unit for reproduction and economic survival. And people, blooming well, cope and do their best. And God bless us, I think that's what we've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, it's like it's the minimum. It's domestication. I just see it as like farm animals. Like it's domestication of humans, and it's the minimum unit of reproduction and sustaining the livestock, basically. Yeah. And that's how you do it, and it keeps them weak as well, because you're immediately in competition with everybody else.
Yeah,
you might still, you know, the last traces of community still survived early on, because when they stuck them all together in slums and back to backs, that, you know, that natural tendency to kind of be tribal came out a little bit. So you had those kind of bonds, but you definitely had that separation and that competition. And it was about, oh, you know, look at what they've got and why haven't we got one of those things? You know?
Yeah. And in terms of monogamy or not, then you're like, as a woman, your competition with other women is real. And then if he's kissing her and then they're going to shack up together in that closed box model, yes, he really is not going to be yours ever. You know, it's really her or you.
Right.
That's real. That's real. And so we've had generations of that. And so that thinking is, you know, is a habit. But yeah, in a different culture, it's a different reality, and we can live a different reality, and our thinking can change. And I think, you know, where I'm at personally with partnership is a position of real exhaustion with monogamous partnership, which is all I've done. But I've explained it to somebody really beautifully recently. It's just I've had partnership after partnership where you've got, you know, you've got sort of got a Venn diagram. You've got two people, me, him, you come together. You've got this beautiful overlapping area, right? You share all this stuff. It's frigging amazing. And then you've got this unoverlapping area, yeah, where you're you and he's him, and it's like you don't quite meet in those points. And then you start to pile all these things on top of each other. You move in together. You become an economic team. You become but meanwhile, you've got massive parts of you that are outside. So what can you do? You can pretend they're not there. You can like try and balance that. But ultimately, every partnership I've had has failed because like too many things are piled on a dyad, where that like an imperfect dyad, and basically I'm too fucking honest. You know, like I can't just shut up and be nice.
You can't just shut up and suffer.
I can't
do
just
your
shut
duty.
up and suffer and do my wifely duty. I'm just too honest about it all. So I'm really actually now open to the possibility of open love, and and tribalism and these things.
It's such an interesting, because I have 2 children, so I do that comes up straight away, like, well, how does it work with kids? But then, of course, it's the whole thing we're talking about. It isn't just sex, it isn't just relationship, it's the entire way we've been living that we're talking about, inevitably.
Right.
And as we spoke then about the separation of people in the industrial setting, and you really see it, or I can see it there, and all the problems and all the pain and suffering people have in those isolated units, and especially when you have a child, and the honeymoon's over and it's reality, the domestic reality sets in, and where's the support? And way back then there was a bit more, but it's been eroded and eroded and eroded to the point now where, ask any woman when she's had a child, the sense of isolation, and I don't know what it's like in the city because I've been in the countryside for quite a while, but it's hard, there's a real sense of isolation because you no longer fit into the kind of culture in a way. Strangely, you'd think having a child might be at the center of any culture if it had any sense, but for some reason ours, it's sort of something you kind of go off to the side and do, and then you might come back later on, and that's so fucked up and so damaging mentally for everyone involved, and all that pressure on those 2 people, to handle that, and the inevitable kind of fallout for the children. It does seem like insanity now that I sort of step back from it and look at it. And I wonder if a lot of the psychological wounding and trauma that happens to us is caused by this lack of a tribe to be there for us in those different moments when a parent was overwhelmed. Because I guess you can't get overwhelmed so easily if there's a whole network of people who are there, physically there, so that when you've just had enough, you just do that with the baby, and there's somebody to hold it, and there's no like you have to make a phone call or arrangement or think, oh shit, can I really ask them? I only asked them yesterday, and all of that bullshit that creeps in. It's just gone, isn't it? It's diffused before it becomes an issue.
Yeah. And
I see that, and I know that intimately from having children and being very much involved, because we did it all at home, and we even them growing up, the early years, it was all homeschooling, and so I know what it is completely to have children in a nuclear family, and it doesn't look like a healthy way to do it to me at all. It really doesn't. So it opens all of that up for me, and kind of answers my own questions, because I think, well, how's this going to work with kids? Because then you do have a relationship with one person, and if that's eroded somehow because of other partners, or what does that do? But of course, the whole context would be different, I guess, is the answer. So
yeah, like for example, I did this month-long community course at Tamera, and one of the things we had a talk. Can you hear me all right? It's raining pretty hard. Yeah. The sound's okay. And there's a community lunch happening in the kitchen next door.
Yeah, and the rest.
That's
such an outsider's statement, isn't it? Like in my imagination, any noise I hear, they're getting it on again.
It's just lunch.
Yeah, but what are they eating?
There was so a thing happened at Tamera. There was a woman, and she had 2 boyfriends. I currently seem to have 2 boyfriends. Anyway, she was at Tamera, but one's in Malta and one's in France, so it's a bit simpler. Anyway, but she had 2 boyfriends at Tamera, and she wanted to have a baby. And they have a thing called forum, where when things are up, you get in the middle, and you're heard, and you're held, and you're supported and reflected, and it's kind of beautiful community process for sorting things out in healthy ways. So she got up, and she's like, I don't know what to do. I want to have a baby, and there's these two guys, and we don't know what to do. And through the community process, it was proposed that, like, how about just cease using contraception and just be in the unknown and continue in the unknown and solidify as a trio. I mean, they weren't like, the guys weren't having sex with each other. It was like they were both partner with her. And what happened is she conceived, and to this day, I mean, the child is about 8 now. To this day, they don't know who the father is. And one of the dads was giving the talk, and he said it was amazing because she started to show as pregnant. He didn't have sex with her anymore. He went into this whole, like, you're a mother, you're not a lover. Do it. Okay. So husband, let's call them husband A and husband B. So husband A didn't want to have sex with her once she was visibly pregnant, but husband B found her really hot pregnant, so she still had sex with husband B. Husband A felt very caring, gave her a lot of massages, took care of practicals, da, da, da. The child came. Husband A just was so in love with the child, really wanted to connect with the child, play with the child, became really the primary caregiver. Husband B was still all about the woman, was giving the woman tons of love, caring love, attentive love, sexy love, tons of love. So there was this woman who'd had a child, and the child was being looked after by one man, she was being looked after by another man, and she just kind of had to be in the middle, making sure all 3 of them were happy, basically. And it was like a fine setup, according to husband A, who was the one giving the talk. So, and you know, in my wanderings, I'm quite itinerant, and I do quite a lot of staying with families who are my friends, who have, you know, created the nuclear family, and I stay in the house. I don't have sex with any of them, but I help out. I hang out with the kids. I cook a meal. I clean up, and they're just like, "Oh my God, life has just become so much easier with a third adult, just extra capacity in the thing." So yeah, it is a kind of tribalization of all of that, and they have ways of doing it at Tamera. And you often hear about children being more tribal children, you know. And I'm an auntie and a godmother, and I actually don't see my godchildren and nieces very often, but when I do, they love me, they pile on me, you know. Their mum gets a break. It's bringing in extra, and I don't want to have children in this paradigm, basically. I think if we lived in village, I would have loved to have been a village mum, but I don't want to be a nuclear mum. I want to be a renewable mum, and or not a mum at all. And what am I saying? Yeah, but so using the extra capacity of the childless, or the people whose kids have left home or haven't had kids left, and us being a bit closer together, so there can be that collaboration.
Yeah, and I suppose the obvious thing is that there's got to be a very strong support, psychological, emotional support network in place, and set of procedures, because stuff will come up inevitably in all these situations. So I guess having that really healthy, healing, supportive infrastructure around is what enables this to happen at all. Because obviously if you didn't have that, people will be spinning out all over the place, and so it sort of highlights that as well. I mean, it's obviously holistic. It's got to be everything. It's like you can't just have one thing. You have to change everything. I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing in our culture as it disintegrates anyway. You can't fix bits of it. The whole thing's got to change, because it doesn't work. So, you know, these are explorations which are going on in all kinds of realms. Quite naturally, probably. This is perhaps how it works in these cycles of cultures being born, living, peaking, dying out, you know, falling apart, whatever. It just seems like there's a lot of new shoots and growth and exploration happening simultaneously as those big old institutions kind of crumble and fall down, which is heartening for me to sort of hear, you know, your experiences really kind of, they raise a lot of questions, or kind of answer a lot of questions as well for me in my imaginings of, well, how could we do this? How could we, you know, move beyond this way that we've got that clearly doesn't work? And I think the nuclear family is a massive indicator of that. It's been this bizarre social experiment, and you know, it's one of those things, because that's, if you've grown up and that's all you've ever known, that's all you've ever known, and you just think, oh, that's just part of it, you know, that's what you have to do, that's kind of how it is. But of course it's not. It's, we've done all kinds of things throughout human history, and it clearly doesn't look like this one works very well, so there's got to be other ways, right? Yeah. So you, with where you're at now, you say you've done this first part of the kind of, I don't know, is it, would I call it training or not?
Yeah, it's called an ISTA training, ISTA.
Yeah. So there's more, there's another part to that, or there are, it's, I guess it's evolving as well, right?
Yeah. I've got my eye on level 2s. I'm kind of seeing, you know, money and where in the world to go and blah, blah.
So the money thing, where's the money going? Is there a kind of private profit-making part of this, or is it, how's all of that? Oh, you've frozen again. Shouldn't have mentioned the money. Oh, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, ISTA is a non-profit registered in the US. It's a 501c3. They have a structure, so each ISTA training runs as its own little business that has its expenses, and then hopefully there's a bit left over, the profit. And the profit, they then have pre-agreed percentages. X% goes to the organizer, X% goes to the lead facilitator, X% goes to the assistant facilitators, X% goes to the scholarship fund, and X% goes to ISTA, the central organization, which does umbrella stuff. And that's how it works. And they express it very transparently, and it seems fine. I actually got the scholarship because I am a paradigm shift artist, and they liked my work, and they gave me a big discount, which I'm really grateful for, because it made it possible for me, because I'm an artist in COVID times, and it's like, yeah, money is a thing that I need to have some change with.
Yeah, how so how is that with your music? What's happening creatively?
Hang me up to dry, looking at the what in my eye. I mean, I don't even get me started. I'm like, I don't know. I've got to be in the unknown and not assume what's going to happen. But basically, I've made this album. It's nearly finished. I'm trying to come back to Britain in January to finish it, but it seems to be on lockdown, and then you can't get out because there's this new strain and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's taken me, let's say, a decade to build up the capacities to create this album. It's taken me a year and a half. I've had to raise something like 10,000 quid to pay all the musicians and studios and stuff. Now we've got to release it. I need maybe another 10,000 quid to make music videos and things like that. I've asked for Arts Council funding. They've said no. And then everybody's telling me that recorded music has no economic value anymore, and it doesn't matter how successful it is, it's going to go on Spotify and nobody's going to pay for it. So you're putting in a year and a half of work, 10 years of artistic development, and maybe 20 grand of investment, and you're not going to get any money back. It's like, what the fuck? That's slavery. That's, I like, literally, by the end, I just felt like, can I, over my mouth, can I shut this voice up? Can I stop singing? Can I do something economically more viable and fairer? Like, fuck this. My gift is to bring voice and be an artist, and it puts me in this horrible economic position that's not viable. and I'm angry and upset and frustrated, and yet music keeps coming out of my bloody mouth. You know, anything that touches my heart, another song comes, and they're gorgeous and they're profound. You know, there's a song about the opening of love. My friend died. We had a Zoom funeral, and there's this beautiful mourning community song came out. It's like I'm this open channel, and it keeps coming. But damn, the economics of being a musical artist in the era of Spotify is I don't know. But I'm going to take a deep breath and be just suck it and see, and try. Give it a year, release it, see what happens. Nobody might like it anyway, or people might actually pay for it somehow, or I don't know. So I'm kind of on the cusp just before the release. Yeah.
Well, you're touching on, this is a problem throughout the arts. I mean, it's kind of relating again to what we've been saying before now, is the whole thing has to shift, and it doesn't work. And it's got to this point where it doesn't even work badly now. If you're a musician, you know, it used to be that, you know, the record industry would screw you, and, you know, if you were really successful, you'd get enough to kind of, you know, drink yourself to death or fuck yourself up or whatever, you know? But now it's like, even that's gone. So, you know, seemingly, or maybe there are a few that get to that kind of height, I don't know, but it's throughout the arts. It's because art doesn't fit with that machine, you know, that is kind of trying to take over everything. So this is a really important question that we're all having. Anyone who's creative is having to deal with this, because how are you going to live, and how are you going to do your art? How are you going to feed your soul, bring your gift to the world, and how are you going to survive? And it's a massive, massive question. And I've gone through this so many times, the kind of up and down of that, and fought it, and then, you know, found a way or not, but I'm more and more convinced that, in me personally, it feels like our calling as artists, whereas before it was kind of like you would produce a commodity for the culture, but it was never quite satisfying for me, that, because that's not what art is. Art is something much, much bigger than that, and much more essential to being a human being.
Right.
It's about our relationship with everything, with the divine, with the mystery, with the whole fucking thing.
With the divine, with the society, with the dream of the culture,
all of it.
Yeah.
And the people that, you know, that kind of self-select, or whatever it is that makes you become the artist or realize that's in you, it's so deeply woven in to you and the history of humans and all of life on earth, that it has to be done. And I'm feeling like the more it gets impossible now, the stronger is my resolve that this is actually the only thing to be doing right now, that somehow it's actually related to the birth of the new culture, you know, directly, that it is our job to midwife the new culture.
Well, exactly.
And if it isn't going to be the artist, who the fuck is going to do it?
Exactly.
Everyone else is tied into the machine, and we're the only people who are willing to put up with this bullshit and starve and fucking struggle and still produce art, still give it away.
Yes.
Because we know it's the right thing to do. So I'm really feeling strongly now that, and it's exciting because it's been woven into all these ancient practices. It's been woven into ceremony and ritual, and it's found spirituality again, which was kind of being removed from it.
Yeah, they've got back
together. And they're all coming back together.
Yeah.
You know, so this, and even now you talking about this kind of tribalism and the kind of sacred sexual arts, and all of this stuff is all part of the same thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, because I'm feeling this like rising, this uprising of energy that's wanting this new thing to happen. And it's going to come through each of us in our own unique ways. And it's going to be about being tied to the land as well, and connected in that way, connected with each other. It's, you know, it's exciting. But it's fucking hard. But then there's the reality of, well, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to feed my kids next week?
Right. And how are you going to, right. And everything you're naming, I would call paradigm shift. And I think we're in this, how does Nako Bear sing it? Interconnected in the wreckage of a paradigm on its way out, its way out. And yeah, there's an old paradigm, it's crumbling, it's dying around us. There's a new paradigm, it's shooting up spring-like, right? And there was this beautiful thing a couple of weeks ago, Martin Shaw, the storyteller dude, said on this event series on climate change, he said, all that is good and true, please come forth now with power. Yeah. I mean, he gave that call, but I think it's the call of the age. It's like, rise. Yeah. Rise. I'm feeling it, you're feeling it, off we go. And okay, so bring your podcast, bring your work, bring your making, bring your leading, bring my voice, bring my wisdom, bring my seeing, bring my guidance that I give to others. Rise. And yet the kind of chaos of the economic machine that we're in. And I think what frustrates me is it's like, okay, make an app. Okay, I mean, I love my teaching. It's like, okay, use the profile that artistry gives you to make money a different way. It's like, yeah, but do you understand how many hours it takes to make art?
Yeah.
Like, holy fuck, if all of that time is unpaid, I can't do it well.
Yeah.
If I have to squeeze it into my evenings and weekends, it makes me
your
an
whole
amateur.
Life.
It takes your whole life. It takes my whole life.
Like, oh, I'm doing it 9 to 5. It's your whole fucking life.
It's your motherhood. It's your marriage. It's your contract with divinity, and your existence. I mean, that's what it is for me. And fuck it. But I feel my potential. I'm a good artist, I'm a good musician, but to maintain this level, it's 2 hours a day practice minimum, and then plus all the work of producing albums and fundraising, project management, blah blah blah, marketing, blah 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 blah. 2 hours a day is just ticking over. If you want to develop, if you want to build a new body of work, you're talking 4 hours, 5 hours a day. Well, how do I do that? 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and I'm being an artist evenings and weekends, or sailing on the coattails of skills I practiced 3 or 4 years ago, I'm going to be mediocre. So it's like, if we want artists in a culture, there has to be a way of resourcing them. Like Berlin, right? The city of Berlin, they have this thing like, if you have an art degree, we consider you an artist and we give you a living wage. I'm like,
yeah.
Holy fuck, can I get Berlin residency? But I have to deal with everybody speaking German around me. But you see, now they have proportional representation, right? So they have a different political system, and then they have a social market democracy, and they have, whereas you see in Britain and America, you have these first past the post systems, and you have very anti-arts economies, where you basically can't really survive as an artist. It's like there's no oxygen. You go out, go do something else if you want a comfortable life financially.
Yeah, and it's seen as, and the few that manage somehow to make it, then that's seen as, oh, it's good because it kind of sorts out the real artists, say. But it's not, it's poverty. You could have like 20 times the art and the culture and the enrichment, instead of this kind of murdering most of them, and the odd one gets through and then they get mangled by that.
But it's part of it, where magic mushrooms are like a class A illegal drug. Artists aren't resourced. Sex has got to be within marriage. Family's got to be in these nuclear, why is it even called nuclear? But it's got, and we live as tribalist atomic consumers dying of soul thirst.
Yeah.
And that's our world.
Yeah.
Fuck
that. That's gone. It's dying.
It's dying.
It's dying. It's killing itself. It's eating itself. And now it's gone insane with this trying to control a virus that's totally uncontrollable. It's actually killing itself. So we just need to help it, mostly by stepping back and letting it do it, because it's fucking doing it.
Yeah.
So I guess we've got to somehow surf that kind of collapse and sustain ourselves in whatever way we can. And I guess community is a big part of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a lot easier when you've got somebody there for you
Yeah.
to manage, when you know that you're not the only one who's like, how the fuck am I gonna,
Right. And when you, like, I'm here with 25 people, and if I have needs, you know, I go have a chat, I go have a cuddle, I go make love, I go, you know, whatever. I get my needs met mostly through human connection. So I'm not shopping. I'm probably eating a bit too much bread and cake, but mostly because I'm happy and I don't care if my thighs are a bit big, and because apparently it's fine. Yeah,
you're working it off anyway, right?
But yeah, materialism versus non-materialism. It's like, you know, the simulacra culture that we have for unmet needs that we substitute with various forms of coping that are, you know, all fuel the economy. So it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. But here's the thing, you know, with your listening, you can talk for a long time about how fucked up things are and how interconnected the fucked upness is and what's dying. But the question is, what's being born and what's being built and what's growing? And that's harder to speak of. It's easier to speak critically of the problems than it is to speak creatively of the new growth. And the new growth can seem very alien, because it is alien. Our normality is toxic, and healthier emergence seems very foreign. We can have a lot of emotional reactivity to it. So,
that's good. You bring that up, because it's a good thing for me to remind myself to kind of, that compass is really important to steer for that. And it may be, like you were saying earlier, in a different context, but it may be more tiring as well, because we're not used to it, because we're not used to talking about those things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's great. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to plug that in. I've got to, you know, this is part of the role of what I'm doing here with this thing, is to explore these new shoots and to give them some more light and maybe propagate that a little bit more, you know, hopefully.
Culture gardening.
By sharing it, because there's loads of good news to be shared.
Yeah.
There really is.
Yeah.
And it's tremendously liberating. And here's the thing, you can take a whole world of that old shit and you put it next to a tiny little bit of the new stuff, and it's so fucking attractive, the new stuff, that everybody, whoever they are, they know it. They know it when they see it, and they want more.
Yes.
So we have to start showing it.
Just rising. And
you know?
This is, you know, when I came out of ISTA level 1, oh my God, it was like these cloaks of fear and shame and self-doubt that I have been walking with my whole life were off. And I was like, come on. I'm a queen, I'm a priestess, I've got this, I'm a singer, I'm a voice, I'm a leader, people are just like, damn girl, you have big prana, and the world has just made this, the universe has just made this seat for you to sit on, and I think it's time for you to just bring it. And I was just like, okay, all right, and off we go. So onward.
Indeed. There are giants in everyone waiting to step up and cast off the little tiny suit, you know?
Exactly. And this is the thing. Each of us rising into our magnificence, our magnificence, my Briony magnificence, your Tim magnificence, and learning to be in a circle of magnificence where everyone is shining their unique shine, in our commonality of humanity and natural life. And that's it, learning to share power and to shine in a circle of the shining. It's because historically in this over-under paradigm, you're kind of trying to work out who's above you, who's below you, right? Where are you in the pecking order, in the hierarchy? And it's like, yeah, man, hierarchy is last year's news. You're in a garden now, and you're a tin flower, and I'm a briny flower. We're surrounded by all other kinds of flowers, and they're all freaking awesome.
Good. Wow. Well, that was a nice journey. I feel like we've arrived somewhere, a good place to pause. And I think this is only a pause, because we're going to do this again.
Okay.
I feel. I hope so, anyway. There's an invitation there.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I love that you're doing this. It's great. I'm really glad to be a part of it. Thank you. Well done.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'll say goodbye, but don't go.
Okay.
Bye.
Happy solstice. Bye-bye.